Okay, I think we are ready to start. Good evening, and thanks so much for coming back or coming for the first time today here. This is our pre-final talk with Danijela Majstorović. I'm really excited and psyched about her being here today. This is the first time we are organizing this kind of I would say like a front lecture in a sense, but also a conversation. This is the new format for the Grounded Festival, although it's not super innovative in some other spaces. But it seems also more important than that Danijela Majstorović is bringing here extremely important somatic and epistemic knowledge. And so I'm really excited that she is a guest of the Grounded Festival and that she, in a sense, is also going to lead us to the final panel where we are going to be talking about the weaponization of the planet. Which is going to be then also a closing panel of the Grounded Festival. I would like to say that, just in brief, that Danijela is a professor in Banja Luka, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and she teaches courses in discourse analysis, communication, media, and cultural studies. She spent a lot of her career abroad at different universities doing significant research, and she published several books and also created several movies. And she will be talking from that vast experience as well of moving her body through spaces, but also finding her body in Bosnia and Herzegovina, a body that survived both war and cancer. So I'm going to give you this mic, Danijela, and thank you for being with us. And I invite you to be attentive and open your ears. Danijela will be talking for about half an hour, and then we'll have a short Q&A session before the closing panel.
Hvala Emina, hvala Grounded festivalu. Ja se izvinjavam ker ne govorim slovenski. Mogu da pričam na ovim našim jezicima, a mislim da ću ovo večeras pričati na engleskom. Mislim, izvinite, ovo je eksperimentalni rad. Ja tek se zaigravam sa ovim nekim temama. Jako mi je drago što me Emina pozvala, a posebno mi je drago što vidim svoje stare prijatelje Primoža i Mitju ovdje. Dakle, mi smo sarađivali nekada prije 15 godina i puno je bilo razmjene između Bosne i Slovenije upravo u tom polju kulturalnih studija, kritičke teorije, kritičke analize diskursa, tako da mi je zaista drago da vidim neka draga lica, isto i neke ljude čiju muziku obožavam. Ali evo, da ne dužim, pošto ću dužiti i mislim da ću vas smoriti, I think I'm going to begin this talk in English, the title of which is Aftercancer, Afterwar, Affective Infrastructures and Revolutionary Love. Drawing on the idea of somatopic narratives in which the body is the site that makes the meaning and directs the plot, I see after war and after cancer as embodied chronotopes connecting bodies, space, and time. As someone who's been affected both by war and cancer, first as a teenager and second in my 40s, one wonders if there is ever an after war and after cancer. Is it a state, a condition, a time space we try to reach and inhabit, war and cancer being personal and political impasses in infrastructure? Does it mean repairing to peace or health, or is it something different altogether? Is it discursive, material? Is it a desire for change, a conversion? In the words of Adam Phillips, how do we think about it? What do we do about it? Both war and cancer share a militant underpinning. Affective attachment to the after-war and after-cancer is in the realm of what Laurent Berlant calls cruel optimism, a fantasy of the good life or a political project of the change that is going to come, indulging, and I quote, in the predictable comforts of the good life genres, like yearning for pre-war or pre-cancer times. Within the base superstructure dyad, the phrase from Anti-Oedipus is most relevant here. Affects or drives form part of the infrastructure itself, and desire is part of the infrastructure. Say Deleuze and Guattari. Having witnessed war and illness in the peripheries where the future reveals itself, according to G.J. Ballard, I try to theorize affect as part connecting infrastructure with bodies. To be in an after-war or after-cancer condition in a cruel optimist manner is a desire to be without fear of impending death and discomfort. There are many structural difficulties that accompany this desire that can never be fully straightened out, like having a perfectly working healthcare system, doctors and medications, or legal institutions such as the United Nations or the Hague Tribunal that could prevent wars or provide just reparations. Unfortunately, the reality in Gaza renders international law dead, even to most believers, and even in the best of worlds, healthcare is reserved for those with money and access. Restoration of a previous good life for bodies affected by wars and cancers as a cruel optimist fantasy in the periphery is therefore a disappointing act. Cruelty and militarization is something that wars share with cancers. Recruiting and mobilization of people, connections and networks, institutions and means such as weaponry or medication, prescriptions, and administrative paperwork also belong to this realm. In Serbo-Croatian, words rat, war, and rak, cancer, constitute minimal pairs. They differ in only one phoneme. We could use an extended metaphor that war is cancer because it is killing and poisoning people, but also that cancer is a war on and within the body, where each affected person expects to survive and win. Both connotate impending death, or at least the likely possibility or proximity of dying, and the affected individual, unless they are a war criminal, has no control over how it starts. Instead, all we can do is manage the consequences. While disturbances of situations organized into world-shifting events threaten the present with their devastating latency, they mostly do not. Life gets reorganized even in the biggest catastrophes, such as waiting for the daily blood counts coming in bad, changing diapers, acidic stoma leaks, or waiting for the humanitarian aid packages to arrive while having coffee in a shelter. These everyday scenarios, the repetitiveness of good and bad days for years on end, are experiential parts of affective infrastructure. One wants them to end eventually. One yearns for an after. Given the bleak prospects of post-war times in Bosnia and Herzegovina, marked by poverty, unemployment, nepotism, waves of immigration and social protests, people in the country will often say that it was better during the war. Affect goes beyond a traumatic event. It is cumulative and contextual. Bosnian and Herzegovinian poet Selma Asutic cannot shake off the grip of the war. She speaks of the Bosnian War as a systemic crisis or crisis ordinariness, a crisis which is mediated and adjusted to or repaired. Repair, according to Berlan, follows from a certain attachment to a broken object, context, and reflects on that attachment, generating a form from within brokenness beyond the exigencies of the current crisis. We are not responsible for the cancer in our body, nor for the war in our country, but once it happens, there's no way out of it. It is a direct hit on lives that need to readjust and recalibrate. You live with your cancer as well as with your war. You mobilize what resources you have at disposal. Both war and cancer are systemic failures, yet individual bodies of survivors fight every day to dispel them or restructure their quotidien to ensure some normalcy, or new normalcy, the term coined during COVID-19 pandemic. It is a glitch in the reproduction of life turned into a crisis, a catastrophe, an infrastructural failure, and an infrastructural repair is necessary for individual survival as well as for any form of sociality to continue. If one is to understand an after-war and after-cancer, one needs to look at the infrastructure that war is part of, the state, including militarization, logistics, army, police forces, etc., and cancer as something that requires treatment in state and or private medical institutions, expensive pharmaceuticals, medical workers, hospitals, etc. Although Bosnia and Herzegovina as a European periphery is much more advantaged and modern than many countries of the global south, Infrastructure norms in the peripheries are different from those in the developed world. Using scale as a method for studying infrastructure via force, time, and social organization would entail measuring, for instance, which of the former Yugoslav republics had the facilities, know-how, and staff to treat more complex forms of leukemia and cancer, or who had access to such medical treatment. But how emotions move through collectively established pathways to create a shared genre of politics and collective political position is also part of the infrastructure. What is to be done with wanting to stay alive and mobilizing everything to make it happen? What is to be done with the desire for life as a human activity or living labor, or of grasping praxis subjectively? How is this desire connected with militarization and mobilization in our fighting or battling cancer? How does it feel living under shelling and bombing and undergoing invasive chemotherapy? Is there a meaning of life outside the militarization logic? Seeing bodies, and this is a quote from the late Marina Wishmit. I hope some of you know her work. The book is apparently coming out. Seeing bodies as the consequence rather than the preconditions of a socially and historically mediated mode of production redefines the political salience of experience that she says is collective, intractable, and principally indeterminate rather than self-asserting, self-owning, and claim-making. Reading affect as part of infrastructure as a particular translatable consciousness about other bodies killed, hurt, made ill, or denied justice through wars, policing, isolation, and violence, and this is from my Peripheral Selves book, is not just a claim-making experience, but can be an intensity with a politicizing potential and a basis of solidarity across the globe. Embodiment may help in awareness of cultural and discursive construction of experience, while at the same time taking into account the embodied aspects of that experience, and thus the role of the body in making sense of oneself and the world. Infrastructure, according to Berlin, is defined by the movement or patterning of social form, and as such organizes transformation and has relative autonomy to structural political imaginaries. Cancer and war share a similar structural autonomy, but also anatomy, lingering in the intensity of now, at least for a moment, before the actual awareness, such as a diagnosis or the news, followed by an internal after. There is also the specter of the past, the specter of what might have been but wasn't, of life that was not lived fully while in a battlefield, shelter, or a hospital room. The moment connects a traumatic event with a larger infrastructure that subsumes that before, too. Nadine Gordimer's short story, The Moment Before the Gun Went Off, in which Marais van de Wever, a white Afrikaans farmer and politician, accidentally shoots and kills Lucas, his young black farm laborer, is a good example of this moment. We later learn about the controversy of whether this was a cold-blooded racial killing or an accident, but also about Lucas being Marais' illegitimate son. The moment is described as a turning point after which nothing would ever be the same. And I quote, "The moment before the gun went off was a moment of high excitement shared through the roof of the cab as the bullet was to pass between the young black man outside and the white farmer inside the vehicle. How will they know when the police stations burn with all the evidence of what has happened now and what the law made a crime in the past?" Bosnian Dutch filmmaker Lidija Zelović opens her 2025 documentary Home Game by quoting her grandmother, "Lidija, mir je dok ne opali prvi metak. Lidija, there is peace until first shot is fired." For all of us remembering the moment when the war in Bosnia happened, this affect becomes inalienable from the B&H's social infrastructure, directing how meaning on what happened is produced and how memory politics in the country operates 30 years after. With the re-emergence of the body as the contemporary locus of sociopolitical agency and, according to Schmidt, a key heuristic in much post-structuralist and post-foundationalist cultural theory and philosophy, with traction both in activism and academia, we want to know more about the biopolitical implications of bodies being articulated through collocations of the state, the political body, and vulnerability, the corporeal, biological body. Taking the body as the minimal unit of political and a site of operation of affect connects war and cancer as physical as well as theoretical concepts. I've been working in the academia and activism for years. After years of lower blood counts and dormant myelodysplastic syndrome, MDS, the cytogenetic analysis in 2022 revealed that I had a monosomy of the chromosome 7, a strong predictor of leukemia, putting me in a high-risk category and a candidate for an immediate stem cell transplant. Bosnia and Herzegovina not offering allogenic transplantation for patients, the options were Serbia, Austria, or Turkey. Because of the post-transplantation management, I was advised to take the nearest country. The monosomy was not congenital. My twin sister did not have it. It was acquired, a glitch in my body triggered by either stress, anxiety, exposure to toxins, or of an unknown origin. As did the 92-95 war in Bosnia, leukemia crept upon me in 2023. There was the changed chemistry, a bug in the system that carried on the possibility of death. I was in denial, overwhelmed by the fear of orphaning my then 10-year-old son. My twin sister could not be the donor. She was only haploidentical, and my perfect match, as I would find out 2 years later, was a 15-year younger German man from Göttingen who happened to be a 10-10 match. My diagnosis often deceived hematologists, mimicking itself first as a cold agglutinin anemia instead of the MDS, then ulcerative colitis instead of graft versus host disease, GVHD, and the blood type being difficult to define. My post-transplant blood type became 0+ instead of A+. I was a rare case of a C crater, and a normal blood draw would read my type as A+. I almost lost my life because of that, because they wanted to give me transfusion with A+ erythrocytes. Only via genotyping was it discovered that my blood type was in fact donor, 0+. I lost 20 pounds, lost hair, changed blood chromosomes from XX to XY, achieving 100% chimerism, becoming, in a way, intersex. I was forced into menopause, and my intestines got severely inflamed, for which I underwent a transplantation of fecal microbiota. I still have to travel monthly to my transplantation center to monitor blood counts, CRP, and GVHD condition, and ideally, these visits will be rarer and health spells longer. Even though my donor was the perfect match, I still got a very aggressive GVHD, which caused skin discoloration, chronic diarrhea, and severe sepsis almost 2 years after transplantation. There was no after cancer as I imagined it, a state of being disease-free. I thought no malignancy confirmed by external punction proved that, but still, the after cancer I was living meant juggling between different tests, finding depression preceding it and euphoria following it, hoping for good days, normal counts, and energy, while being thankful for the insurance and the ability to get treatment in the semi-peripheral Serbian medical institution, as my country was not capacious enough. Cancer and war were inseparable. A 39-day-long isolation felt like being imprisoned. On the day of the transplant, I had fever and severely bled. On the day I was admitted to the University Clinical Center of Serbia, Institute of Hematology, October 27th, 2023, an hour before the greatest attack on Gaza since October 7th, I wrote an unpublished poem, My Body, the Gaza Strip. I'm just going to read a little bit. They killed 7,000 in 20 days. My 7,000 platelets went berserk the moment a needle entered my neck. Prosthesis for chemo that will bring me down to 0 so that nothing else is left to defend me. 7,000 too many, 7,000 too few. Is ground zero the rubble from under which you pulled out a buried child? Or is it that whose face you saw when the cells collapsed in the bone marrow? The Gaza Strip on your body, scars, stab wounds wrapped up in gauze. How are we to come to terms with the affects understood as intensities and changes in the bodily chemistry with an entire infrastructure collapsing? One can certainly indulge in questions of why the body glitched or why a certain chromosome went missing, but very soon, the diagnosed individual will start looking for the cure. There would be doctors' appointments, analyses, waiting for the findings, discussing the protocols, regimes of cytostatics, the coping after. There would be states of delusion, connection with the spiritual, artistic, consolation, and deception taking turns. There would be excrements, bodily reminders of what amount of toxin is still there in the body. There would be feelings of powerfulness, enjoyment of being alive, swimming, dancing, writing, taking walks, some psychotherapy to patch it all up in a cohesive narrative. But I felt the pain, mobilization, and recruiting of whatever resources I had. In the shattered socialist infrastructure of post-war times and in what the war brought in terms of lost people, people who left, with corrupt and irresponsible politicians and fragile institutions, had this European periphery, my experience made me vulnerable to other people's grief. Understanding certain political body sites in terms of intensity and relationality, cancer can be read as the body's response to feeling of injustice, insecurity, uncertainty, and impermanence. It may have originated from seeking justice and healing through historical imaginations and political activism, but it is a condition that needed an expensive medical procedure and an even more expensive management. Cancer survivors are more likely to receive another cancer, my OB-GYN said after examining my ovaries. Given your condition, perhaps you should get rid of them so you don't catch something bad. Aftercancer was a deceptive idea. Perhaps all we had was intercancer, living between cancers, yours and your loved ones. And all you could do was tell your story hoping it would make another person's life more bearable. To be a person with a candle down the murky, dark road of not knowing what is ahead of you, a cultural theorist's approach from her body to those whom life will push onto the same road. And to tell a cancer story, one needed to know their cancer. In the hospitals, many elderly women I met did not even know what they had. They told me to ask their husbands or children. As much as we all felt like war veterans from the same battlefield, I tried hard not to form friendships. You never knew if this person next to you was going to die. For a while, I was in no serious pain, just discomfort from medication until the sepsis happened, lowering my hemoglobin down to 40 and a severe hemorrhagic syndrome, painting my body purple with bruises. I did not see it coming, although the signs were there. I was tired, had thrombosis, and overexhausted myself. My feces penetrated my blood and I collapsed, coming closest to the near-death experience. Of that, I could not talk in medical terms. I was a walking dead with no guarantees of sepsis recurring. I almost died and I understood near death. But the end was not there. After GVHD subsided and the colon started to recuperate, the mysterious point of inflammation was discovered through an accidental MRI. An abscess and a perforated gut on the outside required an immediate surgery. It was a relic from the past, and nobody suspected it. It encapsulated because of the antibiotics to treat sepsis, but as soon as they started weaning off, the inflammation continued. It would take me a long time before it was over. Perhaps it will be like a chronic disease, always there, lingering with a few good and bad days. Perhaps this intermittency is what awaits us with the modern war too. Around the time my doctors would discover an increase in malignant cells in January 23, I was invited by the Central European University in Budapest to give talk to the newly arrived group of Ukrainian students. I was with a group of colleagues from the former Yugoslavia, and we were invited as experts to share our experiences with the students who had literally just left the war zone. The whole conversation was a debacle. The Ukrainian war has been going on for less than a year. The students were too sensitive, and we were seated not among them, but on a small podium, like experts. The students practically laughed at us when we said that at some point there would be peace talks and the Russian and the Ukrainian side would have to sit at the table together. We wanted to tell them about almost 30 years of post-war period and the problems which kept accumulating despite there being no open fire in the Balkans. We wanted to tell them about the war we knew and experienced, and they were not ready. They were hoping that the West would save them from Russia. With the most recent perturbance in the world's geopolitics, the clash between the US and the EU, and the renewed sympathy between Russia and the US, nothing could be further from the truth. What I wanted to say to my Ukrainian students was that there was a specific political economy, war and genocide, shaping an infrastructure connecting the living and the dead, just like cancer. That it would later on become a field, a space of devastation turning into development projects, and that new wars will produce PhDs, new jobs, and career. And I quote Selma Sutic here, who writes about Noah from Oslo, and I quote, "After the cleric, thief, and chief commander comes the intellectual." Not exactly in that order. It never ends. Some other names are now bleeding on CNN's Chiron instead of your burning house. Affect is carried through multiple channels, such as public gatherings and flows, such as through voice, bodily movement, touch, and texture. As politics, affect can create feelings of possibility in the context of hegemonic ideology and hopelessness. I know this war, just as cancer, was not a sprint, but I did not know how long the proverbial marathon was supposed to last. I wish I had been a partizanka, a women's anti-fascist front organizer during World War II. Now, I'm just someone a bit similar to Preciado's testo junkie with the changed bodily fluids, asking myself, like Johanna Hedva, how can you stir up a revolution when you can't get out of bed? The sepsis as breakdown rendered me disoriented and nearly dead nearly 2 years post-transplant. It may be compared with the ever-present near-death experience of women in Yugoslavia during World War II, their organization and sacrifice, and more recently, the women of Gaza witnessing death daily because of the Israeli attack. Are vulnerable bodies capacious to live in an afterwar or after cancer? Bosnian poet Selma Sutic remarks in her poem that every time is the first time because the body remembers but learns nothing. In the periphery, where capitalism, comprador elites strive only to sell more of their natural energy resources and talk about ethnic and religious hatreds while accumulating wealth, canopies at railway stations collapse and kill people. A landslide moves and kills people. A tram derails off the tracks, kills people, and we all look like zombies already dead, just waiting to be buried. In her Lessons from a War, in Say Fire, which is a collection of Selma Sutic's poetry, she anthropomorphizes the Bosnian War. She talks about it as if it were a fatigued living thing, or rather an old man who is always with you and from whom you cannot escape. There is a knowing for those who experience it and embody it, knowing how the affect feels, how it ages and becomes cynical. And I quote, "It never ends. The running behind you, war drags his old bones. He reads an op-ed by a concerned intellectual. We must stop the Balkanization of America. You laugh so sweetly, you and your war. Then you must take him to the bathroom. You hold his head while he pukes. You comfort him. It's all right, my old man, I still remember you. You sit by him on the cold tiles because there is nothing left to do, and there's no one else here except you and your war." And I'm going to finish now. What can the Balkan experience tell Africans, Syrians, indigenous, Palestinian, African Americans, and vice versa? How are we to learn from and listen to one another, we as subjects of colonialism, neoliberalism, fascism, patriarchy, imperialism? The future warriors, should we reinscribe our wars and cancers or do away with the discourse of battles? The anti-Semitic reads as anti-Semitic, making multiple oppressions more visible and palpable. To be a racist, Emina, this is your field, eventually means to be against most bodies, Black, Palestinian, Muslim, Yugoslav. To mind comes Tillich's ontological analysis of justice as the form in which and through which love performed its work. Justice as the channel through which the compulsive and forceful power of love is necessarily directed, and whose violation meant rejection of another's power of being. Perhaps our only chance against militarization is to revolutionize this kind of love and to politicize these affective infrastructures, to collectivize survivors' experiences when possible, striving for an embodied justice as critical interrogation and political organization of the ways in which social justice, often imagined as being focused outward, on fighting injustice in the abstract realm of the social, benefits from the incorporation of the kind of inwardly focused healing and embodiment practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this deep offering, extremely complex and very personal, structural in so many ways, and structured around your own experience and the collective experience as well. You know, while you were talking, especially in the first part of your talk, I was structuring some theoretical questions, and then I dropped that way of thinking, and it struck me when you recited your poem for Gaza, your body and as a Gaza Strip, and 7,000s.
It just came out. I don't know. I can't explain that affect. It just came out. I don't know. I'm not even a poet. I mean, I write for fun, but
yeah.
It came out. It was an ability for me to relate. You know how people sometimes, especially children, when they have problems, and I know this through my son's friends, they begin to cut themselves to kind of, I don't know what's it called in psychology, when you kind of experience some pain and you cut yourself. I mean, I met some people who did that as if to divert the pain. And for me, this was coming together. I don't know how to describe this. Like, you know, we were constantly, you know, with Bosnia, and Bosnian experiences taught me a lot. We're learning to, you know, everybody's been helping us with our post-war. And Selma Asotic is really giving this, you know, he's like an old man. And you're trying with this Bosnian experience and with Gaza and with what's happening, you're trying really to come to terms and be honest, like about yourself, about what you're going to. It's difficult, you know, sometimes we just sound fake. I don't know, I'm having problem with like sounding fake. I'm having problems with sounding fake. I really have come to kind of, I can't take bullshit anymore, and especially with the condition and everything. But I'm also constantly like trying to figure out how to collectivize this, how to, you know, put it into some sort of political action. Because yeah, I mean, I've cried my tears. I mean, I still cry, you know, it was worse. But now I can talk about this without crying. This is a success, you know. You know, and I'm glad that this whole panel, the festival, sorry, the name that we are constantly, you know, it's like diagnosis, it's like militarization. It's pervasive in the disease rhetoric, in the, of course, the wars are all over. I don't know, you know, these are real things. Real people are dying, and how can you feel like, how can you politicize? Like, you know, do you need to kind of cognitively think about it, or is it bodily, or I don't know. I don't know, really.
I'm glad you don't put up with bullshit anymore.
I
and
can't. I just, I don't know if I'm trying not to be a bullshitter myself, but like I really can't put up with bullshit anymore.
Bell Hooks writes about that in Communion. That's the trilogy all about love. And the third part talks a lot about how at some point in the life of a woman, especially when the reproduction and social reproduction cycle comes to a, I wouldn't say a close, but quiets down a bit, how women decide within their bodies, and not necessarily always cognitively, that comes after, decide to not put up with the bullshit. But I just want to come back to the affect. I really appreciated how you talked about the affect as cumulative and translatable. Sarah, and now I come back. I will involve some of the some of the thinking. Sarah Ahmed writes a lot about the way how affect emerges between two skins. In her known text about black skin and white skin and the encounters of black people and white people, she talks about how white person encounters black person within the space, and vice versa, within the space that is created in the distance between the two of them. So it is the decision you make whether you then hug a patient sitting next to you in a hospital, or you decide not to make friends because you know someone of these people will die.
Actually, I was in that situation. I experienced that. I was friends with a woman who also got a stem cell transplant. And I will never forget the doctor looking like to the floor while talking to her mother, saying that the graft didn't work. And she had a 10/10 match. I mean, with hematology, with all of that, it's like you never know what's going to happen. Like you hope for the best, but you never know what awaits you, which is like, I mean, similar. I mean, I remember vividly when the war in Bosnia started. I was 13, 14 years old. You don't think it's going to be bad. You think, it's just for a couple of days. And, it goes. And it's a very similar, I mean, these metaphors should be worked out more. This is an experimental piece, of course. I still have to polish these ideas. But the structure of feeling is the same. It's the same. You hope for the best. And then I met this woman who had this angelic voice. I mean, I really love music. And this woman had this beautiful, beautiful voice. And the next time I came for I don't know, some treatment, I asked about her and they said she was dead. And I was like, okay, Danijela, just stop. Like, don't talk to people, because I was like thinking about her, how can you not? And this white skin, black skin, the thing that I don't know, somehow prepared me or sensitized me to that kind of thinking was this work that we were talking earlier about how I come from Bihać, which is a small town in northwestern Bosnia, which became, when you talk about Bosnia and Herzegovina as a country of double transit, we had this experience of, after 2015, after West Balkan Regelung, when the workers, mostly people who were doing cleaning, Baustelle and Pflege, were openly admitted to Germany to come as workers. Many of our family members got jobs like that, but they were white. Some Muslims, some Christian, Serbs, Croats, doesn't matter. But at the same time, on the mountain of Pljesevic, and your work is related to that too, Bosnia became, especially with these concrete objects being erected, they were called temporary reception centers, but they were in fact permanent reception centers for the surplus populations coming from the Middle East, North Africa, and Southeast Asia. So, it was like this figure of the migrant, which on one hand is, yeah, you Bosnians come to Germany, but this is non passerand for everybody whose labor is not recognized or whose race is not appropriate. So this was a racial, I mean, that just, the situation sensitized me. I mean, you didn't have to be particularly smart to figure that out, but you just saw how people, some were admitted and some weren't. And in fact, and I don't want to open that topic because this is another big story, how the EU funds Frontex, local police in Bosnia to be these gatekeepers to the fortress of Europe. I mean, this is another story. I don't want to get into that right now.
So it's really interesting and extremely appreciated how you do these reflections on life, but then we get a dive into the ways things have shaped historically for you and for many others in Bosnia, but elsewhere as well. We jumped transnationally to different geographies. And that's, in a sense, memory politics with thinking about transnationalization of the solidarity. One thing that I really wanted to ask you before giving a chance, giving a mic to the people sitting here, really goes around coming back to the topic of the festival. And as we are doing some sort of sincere scrutiny over here, my question is, does the body in the war and does the body fighting cancer militarize?
It does. This is the idea that Zoran and I have been kind of developing, like this whole, for instance, recruiting and mobilization as to important factors of militarization. Not only do you think I have to mobilize whatever resources I have, but you literally, you call people, you look for medications. For instance, the medication that I was supposed to be on was nowhere to be found. So you call your friends elsewhere, and then you figure out ways to finance that because these are expensive medications. So you do mobilize your family. Your husband, my partner was my caretaker for 3 years. My parents were helping. My sister. It's super hard for the people around you. So you literally mobilize, you recruit, but then, you very often say, borim se s rakom, I'm fighting cancer. Like, I ask that question, can we escape this logic? But we can't. I don't think we can. Maybe, Selma's, this is why I look into films and poetry to see whether that kind of language can escape. Because with Selma Asotic's poetry, and she's a great poet, definitely read her stuff when you can. She's in the States right now. I love how she talks about the Bosnian War because, on the CNN, because how Bosnian War was the first European war that was televised, the Christian Amanpour, news from, and Bosnia is still exoticized because of the war. It's still, I don't know how the perception of Bosnia and Slovenia is. I mean, I do know it through my friends, but I don't know the general, and I know that a lot of Bosnian Herzegovinians are actually living here, how they negotiate that kind of thing. But, Bosnian war has been literally explored. There are anthropologists, there are sociologists. Everybody wants their little piece of the war, their little something. It's like and Bosnians and Herzegovinians are, okay, they're also profiting, some, obviously, but some, like Selma, I think this is a great criticism. You and your war, ti I tvoj rat više, dosta I tebe I tvog rata, dosta tebe I tvoje bolesti. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll pass the mic over there. If you have any response to Danijela's offering, we can spare a few more minutes. It's worth it. I also thought Katja would ask a question. Or Snježana, or Goran, Zoran. But the offering is experimental, and the response to experiments.
It's okay. No, we can talk about it informally. I don't know. We all get seduced by certain kind of writing. I was seduced by a lot of Marxist writing back in 2009, 2010. And then, you get seduced by, I don't know, it depends. It's all, I know there are a lot of you who are into theory and that kind of stuff. You're seduced by certain kind of writing, and you come from the peripheries, and you're a scholar from the periphery. I do have this American accent because I was on scholarships as a post-war kid from Bosnia. This is how I got it. So I was really lucky to get an education in the West and then come back to Bosnia. And, this kind of traveling between the worlds, I think also shape, and we're all traveling between these worlds. So you're seduced by a certain type of writing, and I've been, lately, I have to admit, I've been seduced by a lot of Loren Berlana, Marina Vishmit, rereading Deleuze and Guattari again. I mean, it's, you kind of think about what these people are writing, and, Simone Weil, I don't know who's reading what these days. you know, as someone who's been a critical discourse analyst or linguist, you know, for years, I figured out, especially with the work on migration and you know, race and labor and that kind of stuff, that discourse studies were not enough for me, that I couldn't be there anymore. I mean, I was a student of Ruth Wodak and all Norman Fairclough and like that kind of stuff. So it was also a left, but then, you know, certain traditions or certain authors really move you. And you know, we are reading a lot of, why did I mention that? I think that it's important to kind of maybe be inspired by these people, but to write on your own. I think it's very important to produce knowledge on these experiences that these guys in the West don't know. They come to pick it up. Like I have students from Vienna who, you know, ask me, what's the situation with queer studies in Bosnia? What's the situation with war? You know, all of that. But I think it's important that local authors and theorists, you know, so it's always like the Western people write theory and we're like the consumers, like, yeah, we'll read, we'll be good students. No, I think we should write from what we have. And you know, this is why it's very, very important to bring scholars, activists, musicians, whatever, from the peripheries to work together. And maybe Ljubljana, maybe Slovenia is a good place for that kind of encountering. I mean, I don't know, you know.
It's curious, and I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but here we have different writers and theorists and translators sitting over here, Katja and Milena, who are wonderful translators, Mitja Velikonya and Ursula Chebron, who are writing really stuff that we can learn from for years. Kiki Milona, that came from Vienna, Snezhana here sitting is writing beautiful poetry. We are inspiring each other, and just sitting here together, we are creating something. Milica Popović, I'm also looking at you, only your Facebook statuses are inspiring. We don't even have to go to your books. So yeah.
We have a lot to give to each other. I think
we do.
I think
knowledge production very much depends on how we are going to refer to each other and reference each other and grow from each other. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Listen, I moderate another panel in 3.5 minutes with some of these incredible women sitting over here. Lana Zdravković, I'm sorry I didn't see you before. I want to say Lana Zdravković is also an inspiring author. Anyhow, I think we're going to start at 8:15 with our closing panel, weaponizing the planet from Mediterranean to the moon, and we're going to be talking about demilitarization through the idea of the commons. Please go refresh yourself to Pritlice, visit Palestinian Bazaar over there, and come back in, say, 12 minutes, so we can start in 15. Thank you so much.